Hello, Body Messiah. Today we're going to cover part 2 of lesson 6 of COOH, which is titled Come Out of Her for the Babylonian and the Beast system. In the last lesson, we covered attributes from both systems, but today in part 2 of lesson 6 of COOH, we're going to cover in details the attributes of the Babylonian system, and we're going to reveal what these attributes are showing us for these latter days, who Asherah, the whore of Babylon, represents today. So I'm going to remove these attributes so we can go into detail to uncover actually who she represents today. Now, as you can see, I have listed up here at the top the Statue of Liberty. Now, the Statue of Liberty was made in the image of this idol, this goddess that is of ancient times. Now, I'm going to show you some pictures of some of the artifacts that have been uncovered from ancient times of how Asherah, like I've said, you can trace her history all the way back to Egyptian idolatry, the Babylonian, then the Greek and Roman. And that leads us up to how the image of the Statue of Liberty is falling in line with that. Not only just from based on the image and what she represents, but what she also represents spiritually. When we think about the United States representing liberty and justice for all, it doesn't always fall, usually does not ever fall in line exactly with the ideology of what the United States is. And I'm going to show you that this Statue of Liberty still falls in line with the hypocrisy of representing liberty while yet severely oppressing various groups of people. So I'm going to show you these photographs. I want you to pay attention to the images and not the words in the background, because these images come from a lesson that I taught about 5 years ago when I was doing biblical racial reconciliation with the members at that congregation that I attended, the mixed congregation. So there's going to be some stuff typed on there, but I want you to really focus on the images so I can show you how the Statue of Liberty is also, as of today, made in the image of Asherah. Now here you can see the image of Asherah from back in idol worship time when even Israel engaged in some of the Canaanite practices of worshiping in her. You'll see the rays of light from the top of her head, just like the Statue of Liberty. And you can see when you look over to the other side, the Egyptian idol that goes by a different name. Her Egyptian name is Isis. And you can see this little bowl or this light that's supposed to be on the top of her head. It's supposed to be saying that she's enlightened. Now you may be saying, okay, that doesn't look like facially the Statue of Liberty. Now look at these images here. These are statues that represent Greek and Roman goddesses. In Greek mythology, she's known as Artemis. And in ironic, there's a movie coming out called Artemis Fowl. Anyway, that's what she's known in Greek mythology. In Roman mythology, she's known as Diana. Now, as you can see, the image in the middle, Apollo is the brother of Artemis, and he has those light rays coming from his head. But you can see facially, she is identical to the Statue of Liberty. Now, I also want to point out, when you look at the biblically, you should go to Acts chapter 19 and chapter 20. And depending on, in the Tree of Life version, I know that it's in Acts chapter 19, verses 24 through 40, where it talks about this idol that is being worshipped. And such a conflict was brought up when Rabbi Shaul was in town because they were angry that he wasn't honoring this particular Greek goddess, Artemis. In the King James Version, I'm not sure, some other version, it may be in Acts chapter 20, but you can go and look it up for yourself. Now, when you think about what the Statue of Liberty represents, and you think about all these attributes we're about to cover, you'll understand that the United States has reflected all of these attributes. So the first section that we're going to go over is how in the attributes it says that the kings and the merchants of the earth have made riches based on her self-indulgence. Think about that the kings and the merchants of the earth have made riches off her self-indulgence. Now, I'm going to say this, as I may say it multiple times. The whore of Babylon, the Babylonian system, and the beast system, Baal, satanic worship, is throughout the world now. What I'm doing is pointing out that for the particular attributes that are specified in the book of Revelation, these things are very much so applicable to the United States of America. And here's why. Now, in the beginning, as far as you thinking about Asherah and the whore of Babylon and how the merchants and the kings have made riches based off the self-indulgence, think about all the European kings and queens who set out on a goal to go and colonize the world and take possession of land where people already lived and began to search for riches. And it was for the purpose of their self-gratification and their self-indulgence. Think about when the beginning of America happened, as far as being colonized, that the people were fleeing the persecution in Europe, religious persecution that the government there was inflicting on them, or the dictatorship under the kings and the queens. And so they came here with an idea that man will be able to worship freely and not be burdened by the oppression from the government. In that same token, while they were running from oppression and thinking they were going to create a better utopian society, they were doing or abiding by the same oppressive practices that their kings and queens were. Because when they came to America, they severely abused and slaughtered the indigenous Native American population. They drug Africans, descendants of African slaves, all the way to America in order to oppress them, to do all of the heavy work in the building and making wealth off that free forced labor that they were placing on their backs. And also at the same time, oppressing, slaughtering, and treating them all less than human. So Asherah, that spirit behind her, is selfish, greedy, and it's all about her. It doesn't matter how she attained the goal of her riches and self-gratification. So you'll understand that there was a dual dynamic going on spiritually in America when the Europeans came and initially began to colonize it. And it carried throughout the history of the United States of America. Another attribute says that her businessmen were the tycoons of the world. Think about this. In America, specifically in New York, now we know that the Statue of Liberty is located right there on the waters of New York. Her businessmen were the tycoons of the world. All the tycoons of the world emanated from New York, because you have the New York Stock Exchange, you have Wall Street, all of the trading, all of the riches that were gained by the merchants and the kings and the queens of the earth came out of her. So she was known for generating all of the business tycoons of the world. It says another attribute for her is that the kings and the leaders took part in her sexual immorality. Now think about this when you think about America and the sexual immorality that's carried on through this particular idol on a spiritual level. Now, Asherah, in the various ways that she was worshipped as being a goddess of fertility, that included doing practices that were extremely sexually immoral, like houses of prostitution. That means male and female. Even things that went as far as abusing children sexually. So it says that the kings and the queen partook in her sexual immorality. And I want you to think about in America, coming out of Hollywood, California. Out of Hollywood, you have the highest volume of pornographic images and videos being generated and distributed throughout the world. The center of that has come out of Hollywood, another American city. So, partaking of our sexual immoralities, there are kings and queens, leaders throughout the world who have partook of her sexual immorality. And America led this particular type of lifestyle by generating all these images and videos. They are the lead in it. Think about slavery, like I said, and even the oppression of the poor, the orphans, and the widows. Think about that. This country is supposed to represent liberty and justice and freedom for all, that men were created with inalienable rights. But at the same time, that demonic spirit of oppression, severely abusing and using all of these particular people, was at the forefront of building the wealth of the country of the United States. Now, I know some of y'all are going to say it's not just the United States. I totally agree. Being that descendants of Africans and African slaves are descendants of Israel, and they were scattered through the four corners of the earth, this type of oppression occurred throughout the four corners of the earth. And their labor and through their oppression, all the wealth of the earth has been built and created. Even look at the continent of Africa. Africa generates all types of resources that's able to sustain all these various nations throughout the world. But yet they're depleting her, and they're taking the resources and not trying to honor the people who live there and the land that is owned for those people. But God is changing that dynamic too. He has steadily been doing it. So I want you to think about all of this when you think about those attributes. The New York Stock Exchange and how all of these sexual images and videos have come out of Hollywood. Think about the fact also for the United States. I want to mention when we deal with the poor, the orphans, and the widows. I've heard this multiple times in the past few weeks since the murder of George Floyd has happened, where they talk about, there has to be criminal justice reform. There has to be a reform of our justice system. And that is true because God is placing judgment continually on America and other nations because of their oppression. But think about the fact that oftentimes the poor, the orphan, the widows are the ones who are in prison, the ones who are placed in this prison industrial complex. There's a statistic that they've shared over time that I've seen on the news is that out of all the women that are in prison on the earth, females that are in prison, the United States has 1 out of 3 of those female prisoners here in the U.S. So 1/3 of all the female inmates and prisoners in the world are located here in the United States. And I guarantee you, the majority of them come from poor households, could have been orphaned, could be widows. But think about the fact that all of them were somewhat forced into a situation where they may have contributed to an illegal lifestyle in order to survive. We as the body of Messiah are supposed to help those who are poor and orphan and widowed. I don't want to hear people, it irritates me to hear them say, it's their fault. They shouldn't be engaging in illegal activity. But if you're a member of the body of Messiah, tell me, what have you done to help that poor brother and sister who may be living in an area that doesn't have jobs for miles or even healthy food for miles? What are you doing to help them, being the body of Messiah? It's wrong for us to treat them cast off and saying they need to figure it out on their own and God will help them, when we're members of the body of Messiah and he's obligating us to contribute in a helpful way to their life so they don't have to feel the pressure being forced into illegal activities. Now we're going to go on to the next attributes here. And in the next attribute, it talks about how she has become a den for demons. Now, to me, that means in the beginning, she wasn't a den for demons. But in the beginning, when you think about the start of the U.S. being colonized, all of those who were fleeing religious persecution, all those evangelical Christians or denominations who fled to the U.S. in order to try and create a better society, they were paranoid. They were paranoid about people engaging in witchcraft or Satanism, and they would burn people at the stake. Think about the Salem witch trials and things like that. So in the beginning, she wasn't a den for demons and a place filled with every unclean spirit. But over time, she did. In America, for instance, when you look at the late 1960s through the 70s, you will see that the U.S. allowed Satanists, Wiccans, that means those who practice witchcraft, to practice it openly. And you'll notice during that time period, you had the highest rise of New Age cults, different cults like the Hare Krishners and those who believe in different seeking out and finding themselves, and Taoism and Confucianism. Things that were not worshiping the Most High God, for instance. You have cults that were so-called Christian cults, people who claim to believe in the Messiah, but they began to glorify a man or a Christian leader as if he was God and subject themselves to these particular leaders. They were breaking out throughout the U.S. Think about Jim Jones and how he had forced mass suicide on all the people because they were glorifying him like he was God. So think about the fact also that there were many during this time, many organizations where you would see, for instance, the Catholic Church involved in an increased amount of abuse against children. That means sexual abuse and other things. Think about the people who were in these cults. They engaged in activity where they were extremely abusive to their children, not just physically, but also sexually. And I think that went hand in hand with the fact that a lot of the pornographic things had an extreme rise or increase during the 70s. You know, it's supposed to have been sex, drug, and rock and roll. Now, it also says that she was filled with every unclean bird and beast or animal. And as I said before, this is due to the fact that in America, we generate nearly all the GMO foods from here. That means genetically modified foods. So the animals are bred and genetically modified to be bigger, stronger, or to mass produce more. For instance, chicken. We think about even when it comes to plant, they have genetically modified plant life so it'll be more resistant to insects. And so it won't die out quick or be more heat resistant. This was not in God's original plan. A lot of these GMO foods are not healthy for our bodies. So, like in the beginning, God said He created these animals and they reproduce after their own species, their own kind. All of these particular unclean beasts and birds and stuff are due to genetically modified modifications occurring. And that's not right in the eyes of God. Now we're going to go down to the next set of attributes where it talks about, remember I said that the angel or Adonai was telling this prophet that the woman you saw is a great city that exercised kingship over the kings of the earth. This great city, it also says that she's located on the waters, of this great city. The Statue of Liberty is on the waters of the New York City. New York City is this great city. It talks about how these waters represents all these different nationalities and ethnic groups and tongues or languages. That's exactly what New York represents. They contain a variety, multinational, multi-ethnic, all these various language and groups of people. But when it specifically says that the great city exercised kingship, it exercised kingship over the kings of the earth, it had me wonder, like, yeah, America does flaunts its power and has for a long time over other nations and kings of the earth. And in particular, when you think about Ashura and how she is all about wealth and self indulgence, one of the main ways that the United States has flaunted is strength and power and kingship over the kings of the earth is through financial institutions. There is an organization called the World Trade Organization. Now, when you look at the World Trade Organization, its headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. But the World Trade Organization was ran mainly out of the United States, out of New York City. And I'm going to prove this to you that the Word of God is true through and through. Even though the headquarters now of the World Trade Organization is Geneva, Switzerland, the place that was attacked during 9/11 were called the World Trade Towers or centers. So the center of world trade came out of the Twin Towers, which are located in New York City. I want you to go and read. So this is how the United States flex its exercise kingships over the kings of the earth. It's by flexing its financial power and inflicting financial oppressions on various groups of people. Think about this when they talk about doing things like with trade, having to inflict embargoes, having to do things like, I'll give a prime example, Haiti, for example. When the Haitian people fought against the French and they utterly destroyed the French because they were tired of being enslaved and severely oppressed and abused, the US, along with other European nations, inflicted financial oppression on them and said that they owe like 100 million, some outrageous amount of money, and have to pay off the debt for slaughtering or fighting off and killing off the French. And from that point on, Haiti, which is a country full of beautiful resources, especially sugarcane, has been under oppression. And this is one of the ways that the United States have flaunted its kingships over the kings of the earth. Now, remember, I said to you guys that between the Babylonian and the beast system, one is more naive than the other. The Babylonian system is more naive than the beast system. And I'm going to reveal to you right now why. When you read Revelation chapter 17, verse 16, it says that God gave to the beast and the 10 nations a heart where they despised, they hated the whore of Babylon. It says that they will devastate her. They will make her naked and desolate. They will devour her flesh. They will burn her with fire. Now think about 9/11. What happened? The World Trade Centers were destroyed and it was burned with fire. And this caused financially the United States to sit back and have to take a back seat for a while as far as running all of the trades of the earth and holding all the tycoons of the world. So when you look at that, it kind of fulfills that prophecy when we think about 9/11 of how the beast and these 10 nations are going to behave towards the Babylonian system. And look in Revelation chapter 18, how the kings and merchants and all wail like, oh my goodness, what's happening? And they mourn because she's being destroyed. I want you to even go further and think about present day time and the coronavirus and the United States financial status. The coronavirus has killed more people in the US. It's like a third of all the deaths in the entire world. And the US supposedly has the most advanced healthcare system and everything. I'm saying to you, the coronavirus is a plague. Like I said before, it's a part of the judgment on America. But it caused all financial work, trading, everything to come to a halt. The US cannot financially rebound from this. They said it may take years before it happened. One estimate I've heard said it could take up to 8 years or so before they could rebound from the impact of the coronavirus. Some of these other nations that were already poor probably don't have to worry about as much of a financial impact, and they know how to survive off very little. But this is a part of the whore of Babylon and her fall, and her destruction, and her being moved out of her position in preparation for the beast system to reach its tentacles in and try to control the whole world on a spiritual level, first and foremost, because that's all the beast system is worried about. Well, body of Messiah, I've covered this to the best of my capabilities. I hope and pray that it was eye-opening for you. I hope and pray that some of you are not traumatized by it, because I know a lot of people would like to look at the United States as a place that is full of nothing but good, only freedom and justice for all. And for this veil to be removed from your eyes is because God is trying to wake you up. For those who may have for the first time seen the whore of Babylon be revealed in this manner, He wants you to trust Him above everything and all things. That includes government systems, that includes political systems, that includes anything that mankind is trying to throw at you as saying that they're the salvation and the thing that will come and put everything right in the world. That will never happen. It will only happen until our Messiah returns. So for some of you, take this as a wake-up call and come out of her, because you're God's people. He does not want you to partake of the sins and all of the judgments that are about to fall on her. So when you trust in Him with your whole heart, you can be under His shield of protection. So trust in Him and be guided by Him alone. Well, body inside, this is the end of part 2 of lesson 6 of COOH. I hope you enjoyed it. In part 3, we're going to cover in detail the attributes and exactly who the beast system is going to reveal to you, who is pointing towards these latter days. Well, I love you, body Messiah, and as I always say, may Adonai Elohim cover you, shower you and your family, shield and protect you under His shalom peace. Goodbye.